My name is Rob, and I'm the Dungeon Tutor. Now, I've been on YouTube for over 4 years, and I've got a lot of gaming experience, especially my passion, tabletop role-playing games, which I've been writing, designing, playing, and running now for over 3.5 decades. I use that experience in my channel Lair of Omnici to educate and entertain. But what I wanted to do with this, a separate channel, Dungeon Tutor, is answer questions that people have and try to educate people in things they're curious about, and also to offer advice and, hand up in some cases from some games that might be a little bit more complicated, or people who are just looking for a different perspective. I try to be as objective as possible and always supportive, and this is going to be a series of mostly one-take videos with little editing. Hopefully, you'll have some questions that you'll want to ask, and by all means, please do. I'll make a video of it. You'll get to see your answer in front of you on your screen. So, in advance, thank you for your participation and wanting to be a part of Dungeon Tutor, and I look forward to seeing you from your computer screen or phone. Thanks, and farewell. Hello friends, I am Rob, the Dungeon Tutor, and in today's session, I actually got a question from a friend who is interested in a game system that is not Dungeons & Dragons. And my friend is having a little bit of a hard time wrapping his head around the core concept of this game, so I thought I'd make this video to help out and to help anybody else out who might be having some challenges with this style of game. It's a little bit different from what you might be used to in terms of games like Dungeons & Dragons. Even though some of the trappings may look similar, the style and output is quite a bit different. So, today we're talking about Modiphius and their 2d20 system. Now, of course, 2d20 sounds pretty close to the d20 system, and really, that's the only thing they have in common. There's quite a bit of difference between them. So, first of all, Modiphius has made several games, and I own 2 of them. So I can't speak for all of Modiphius's games that use the 2d20 system. The 2 that I have, I'm not going to say are completely representative of all of the 2d20 systems, but I think I've got enough from looking at the core rules for these games that I have a pretty good idea. So the 2 games that I have for it are John Carter of Mars, which is kind of an interesting game, and we also have the Devil's Run role-playing game, the post-apocalyptic vehicular mayhem role-playing game. So, obviously the one is based on the intellectual properties that were created for the John Carter of Mars story by Edgar Rice Burroughs. And that is an extensive selection of stories about John Carter and he and his friends and their exploits. So the challenge of making the role-playing game was incorporating the essential elements of Mars and its environs and creating a universe that you can have a lot of fun in. With The Devil's Run, it's basically recreating all those fun post-apocalyptic movies like Mad Max, Apocalypse Now, things like that. And how do you do it? Well, you have a system in place that allows you to play in a particular style, and if you were looking to play Dungeons & Dragons D20, your style would be attempting to simulate how things go and have everything come down to simple dice rolls. This system doesn't do that necessarily. It's far more interested in telling a story. It is a more narrative-heavy system, so there are elements to it that just don't fit in a system like Dungeons & Dragons. Intelligently designed to allow players and the game master to alter the flow of the game to tell a better story, or the players can manipulate things so that their characters have a better chance of looking good in the styles that are important to them. So, core system. 20-sided die. Okay? Your characters are going to be familiar with these. You'll need 2, and you may need as many as 5. That's as many as you'll ever need. Now, yes, you can re-roll it over and over again, that's fine, but some people just like being able to roll all the dice you'll need at once. So you need 2 to 5 20-sided dice, ideally. You also need 6-sided dice. And everybody knows 6-sided dice. You may have rated your Yahtzee game or Monopoly or whatever for that. Those dice can be awfully handy too. You'll want a small pile of those if you can. So, what are these used for? Well, first of all, your character is defined by attributes. Very common. Many games use attributes for your characters. This is no different. Your attributes are going to vary depending on what's important in the particular game that you're playing. So, for instance, if I'm playing in Devil's Run, and I'm looking at the character sheet, and I can see the attributes are agility, smarts, spirit, strength, and vigor. Okay, that's not too hard to figure out. It roughly translates into something you might be more familiar with. Strength and strength, vigor and constitution, agility and dexterity, smarts as in your intelligence, and spirit as like your willpower. Nothing in your charisma. It's a force for more of your personality. John Carter of Mars has a different selection. But I just want to say that I do, while it annoys me on a visual level looking at these books on my bookshelf, the approach they made by having these lengthwise books, it's nice, but it annoys the heck out of me from looking at my character sheet and going, oh, okay. Or looking at the library and these stick out and it bothers me. I'm not fully OCD, but there are elements. And the attributes for these are written smaller. But the attributes in John Carter of Mars are cunning, daring, empathy, might, passion, and reason. Notice that only one of those is physical. Might, how physically strong you are, that can be determined. But the other ones are all kind of left as vague aspects of your personality that in this kind of a game, that's going to be more important than actually tracking exactly what is your constitution, what is your... Obviously, some of these are going to change, but if you're doing something based on strength, how you're doing it is often as important in John Carter of Mars as whether or not you're physically capable enough to do it anyhow. That's why those other attributes exist. So, how does that translate into using these dice? Well, first of all, when you build up your character, all of those attributes have a number to them. And if you're particularly developed in that attribute, it'll be a higher number. In Devil's Run, your numbers can go up to 14, and that would put you at peak human capacity. John Carter of Mars, they can go up to a 12, which would put you at peak human or Martian capacity. Whichever. And if you've never read John Carter of Mars, it's weird, but the humans are the strongest race in the game because Mars has lower gravity. So humans are used to the resistances of Earth and its higher gravity, and therefore a human who shows up on Mars can leap incredible distances and kill opponents with a single punch, potentially. So, that's kind of interesting. So, what are these dice for? Well, obviously they go from 1 to 20, right? So, in this case, you have to get a target number. What is that target number? It varies by the game. I think John Carter from Mars is an outlier from the way other games work. John Carter of Mars has no skills. It's assumed that if you try to do something that your character has a reasonable chance of being good at, you will be skilled in it. And that's fine. If you are playing the Devil's Run, and I suspect a lot of the other games, your skill is going to be added to the attribute that it relates to the most. So, for instance, if I have an axe and I want to crush somebody with an axe, I would roll my might, physical strength, and my skill with an axe. But it gets complicated. So, in John Carter of Mars, I roll 2 attributes totals as my target number. So say I am fighting a desperate fight against 2 skilled Martian opponents. Well, I would take my might, because I'm fighting with my sword, and maybe I'd take passion as my ruling attribute on how I'm going to fight. And I would roll 2 20-sided dice, and I'm trying to get under the total. Either the attribute in skill for, I believe, most of the games, but certainly Devil's Run, and the total of the 2 attributes that apply in John Carter and Mars. Now, of course, there's examples in John Carter and Mars that if you do this, it's these attributes. I'm just using this as an example real quick. So you take the ones that apply, you total them up, you roll. If you get that number or less, it counts as a success. Higher, it's a failure. And remember, you get 2 of them. Now, I hear you saying, but that means you can only get 2 successes. No. First of all, skills are broken up into 2 levels under Devil's Run. You have expertise, that is, how likely you are to succeed, how good you are. And you have focus, meaning how deeply you've delved into it to make the successes that you get even better. So for instance, somebody who is skilled with a broad range of their jobs is not going to fail very often. They may have excellent expertise. If they don't have the focus, if they don't have the passion to really delve into it though, they're probably not going to excel beyond just common success. Whereas if they have focus, they might be able to surprise with an even greater success. So, in Devil's Run, you would have your attribute plus your expertise gives you the absolute total that you're rolling against. But if your number is equal to or less than the focus that you have in that skill, if any, then you count that as 2 successes. Kind of a critical success, if you would. So, you could, if you have any levels of focus in a skill, you could always roll a pair of 1s and get yourself 4 successes. It's possible. And 4 successes is considered something that is epic in scope. It's very, very challenging things might require that many. So if you have any levels of focus at all, you might be able to get that. Now, if you have 2 attributes in John Carter and Mars, you would roll, and if you roll under the lower of the 2 attributes, that counts as 2 successes. So your chances are pretty darn good in John Carter of Mars because it's expected you're going to be piling up a lot of successes. Your characters are going to be really good at things. Now, first of all, number 1, that is the basic mechanic. After that, everything can change, but don't worry, it's not too crazy. Number 1 is that 2 dice may not seem like it's enough, especially if you're doing something that's particularly dangerous or important, something your character cares a great deal about and would put extra effort into. There's a separate mechanic in both of these systems, and I believe throughout the 2d20 system, called momentum. Now, momentum is kind of a funny thing. It's the narrative part of the story that's saying when you're doing well, you tend to keep doing well. So, if you have momentum on your side, it's actually tracked as a number. And so for instance, the easiest way to use momentum is to give yourself an extra die to roll. So you can roll 3 20-sided dice, 4 20-sided dice, maybe 5 20-sided dice, which is cool. You can also use momentum for a variety of other things. Taking another attack, perhaps, increasing the damage you do, increasing the number of targets that are affected by a particular effort that you put in. Like you're speaking to people, you can increase your momentum and you can increase a wider audience. Things like that. Momentum can be extraordinarily handy, but a lot of the advantage of momentum is that it keeps you being successful, which can often generate even more momentum, which is important and cool. So, momentum can be used to give you extra dice. Another thing that can be used is, I'm just going to, like I said, I really do believe that the Devil's Run is closer to what most other people's experience in the 2d20 system is, so I'm going to primarily go with that. But there's Fallout in this game, and it's probably called something else, but what it does basically is it's a bargaining system. You can bargain to roll extra dice on a roll, but your game master keeps a currency of Fallout in this game, and that represents bad things that might happen to your characters. Maybe the enemy character gets an extra die to roll when they try to do something to you. Can happen. They might be able to use Fallout to snatch initiative from your characters, because otherwise your players all get to go first because they're cool. But the Game Master can snatch away initiative and let one of his characters act if he wants to, using Fallout if he's got any. So that's another important element of the game. So, going to that well, if you don't have any momentum but you need extra dice, is available. It's a carrot that's hung out in front of the characters to be cooler when they need to. But there's a cost, and that's kind of important to know. And in a game like, say, Devil's Run, where things are important to have the stuff you've got, they also have salvage points, which can also get you successes too, which is pretty cool. But that is essentially most of the core mechanic that you've got to the game. You roll the 2 20-sided dice or more if you can get more dice. You always want to roll as many dice as possible. The most you can get is 5. You can't roll less than 2 is my understanding. And you have a certain number of successes you need to do based on how difficult the task is. It's either your everyday task that requires 1 all the way up to epic that requires 4, and there's the range in between. If it's less than 1, if it's 0, then there's no point in rolling, and you can't generate momentum on that. No matter how good you are, the circumstances are beneficial to you. Teaming up with other people can get you extra dice too. So generally anything you can do to give yourself advantage may give you extra dice. Momentum being the easiest and most common currency of doing it, but there's other ways. And canny players will exploit that to get their characters as many dice as possible so they have the best chance of getting a good result, looking cool, doing what they want, and hopefully advancing the momentum. Now, here's another cool thing about momentum too. Momentum is not just a personal currency. If you're trying to do something, like say I'm going to try to, in Devil's Run, I'm going to try to attack this drooling, drug just addicted ganger who's attacking me. And my character is a duelist. He has a pistol. He whips it out, shoots the ganger. An easy thing. The guy can't really dodge all that well, but he is dangerous. He's got a knife, and he might ignore the effect of my shot just because he's so wasted. So I shoot, and say I get 5 successes to hit on what is an everyday average roll of 1. That generates 4 points of momentum, which can be kind of cool. So I can bank those 4 points if I want, or I can use that momentum to help me do other things in my shot to increase the overall effectiveness of what I do. I can use that momentum to increase the damage by 1 point for every momentum I spend. So if I really want to hammer the person before I've rolled a single die for damage, I can layer on 4 points right off the bat of damage before I've even rolled, which probably will be enough with the damage to put him down. I can also do fun things like do called shots. I can shoot him in the hand to disarm. You know, there's a variety of things in each game. Probably has their own costs for everything. I noticed there are some differences between the systems. So you're going to need to know your system to know exactly what the cost of everything is. Many of the things are fairly narrative in scope. They're the things that allow you to tell a better story with what you do rather than just say it slaps on damage. Which is something that is freed from the scope of games like Dungeons & Dragons, where everything is just boiled down to numbers. This allows you to tell a story with each stroke in battle, which is kind of cool, and lets you look even cooler in a fight. Now, that is basically the 2d20 system laid out before you. That is the system you use if you're trying to jump across a ravine, if you're attempting to shoot somebody, if you're attempting to do some technological thing, if you're attempting to engage in social combat with somebody and try to weaken their resolve. That system is used for all of that. And all the things that I mentioned for giving you extra dice, including the momentum, especially the momentum, is something that is basically in play for the entirety of the game. Momentum, as I said, is a shared thing. So if you dump momentum into the pool, up to 6 points can be stored and anybody can use it. Because if one side is doing well, generally everybody on the side tends to do pretty well. And you can draw off of that pool to do things when you need it or when you just want to, which is kind of neat. And sometimes having those extra dice to roll can generate even more momentum, which, again, really cool element of the game. Now, I did generally touch upon almost everything that's in that core rule sample. Combat's a little bit different because with combat you're rolling six-sided dice. And again, I believe this is how it works for most of the systems. If you roll six-sided dice, you generate a certain number of them. That number can vary based on skills and talents that you have. And one of the cool things about talents I've read is that talents generally change the costs on how much momentum different things require you to pull off, which I think is kind of neat. And they can also, kind of lead your character to different approaches to settle difficult tasks, and often give you extra successes or extra dice to roll just because you have a particular talent, which is pretty neat. Now, if you're attacking somebody in combat, you roll six-sided dice, but it's not just totaling them up. Oh no, the system's a little different from that. If you roll, say, 4 dice, okay? If you roll a 1 or 2, you take that number and you add it along with any other dice you have, say, for that your momentum gave you extra dice of damage. So you have that. A 1 or a 2 counts as a 1 or 2 for points of damage. A 3 or 4, you ignore. Just, nope, doesn't happen. Nothing happens there. If you roll a 5 or a 6, that counts as 1 plus an effect. And different weapons have different effects. So for instance, if you shoot somebody with a shotgun, and you shot, one of the effects is spray. It fires and may hit multiple opponents. So if you shoot well enough that you get multiple dice, and one of them is a 5 or a 6, that spray effect can trigger, and you can hit multiple opponents with that shot. That burst of shot, which is, again, pretty cool. It doesn't mean that all those things are always going to trigger, but some weapons can have some pretty nasty effects that you're going to want to trigger often. So whenever you hit somebody in combat with a weapon that has a lot of dice, not only do you have the chance of doing a great deal of damage, but you also have a chance of really pulling off some interesting effects. And sometimes the cooler weapons aren't the ones that do the most damage, but have some pretty neat effects, like knocking down your opponents with a blow, or causing, horrific bleeding wounds, things like that. And, all things considered, it's an interesting and dynamic system. It means that there's a lot of tension at every level of the game, because not only is it just a pass-fail situation. I roll to get across that, I pass or I fail. You have a chance to generate some momentum, you have a chance to add some drama to the roll, a bit of tension, and lingering good or bad effects as you go along. Also, there's complications to consider. Complications are when you roll a 20-sided die, and usually if you roll a natural 20, that's a complication. Although more difficult things may have a greater range of complication, so that if you roll a 19 or an 18, it creates a complication too. That's something that gets your character, narratively usually, that makes what you're doing just that much harder, or throws in an extra wrinkle. If you succeed, it comes at a cost. If you fail, it hurts even worse. So that's something else to consider. Also, sometimes when your chances of success are relatively low, you need a lot of successes and you don't think you have the attributes to pull it off, the fear of complication sometimes may make your character just decide to fail on purpose to go forward, which can happen sometimes. For example, in Devil's Run, you get rewarded if you try something knowing you're going to fail. You can get a salvage point out of it, which can be a useful advantage that you can pull out when you really need it. So that's yet another little wrinkle in the game system. Most people don't think of the dangers of failing outside of it doesn't work, but that cinematic element of consequences that might spring up is another wrinkle onto the 2d20 system. So something to think about there too. So that essentially is the core of the d20 system, and a little mention of the combat system that Modiphius uses. Now again, I'm going to say I am only familiar with 2 games, and I can't say that I'm 100% because I've never run either game. This is just what I've absorbed from reading. The ins and outs of different games that you play, like my friend is considering the Dishonored game, based on the video game. There will undoubtedly be extra quirks, extra elements to the game based on the kind of magic-y things that your characters can almost certainly do, from what I've seen of the video game. As well as high amounts of stress in combat, different things you might want to try to do in combat, which is fine. But you're going to need to have that book to understand everything, and the costs on different skills and abilities may be different. Certainly improving your characters might be similar in various games, because again, they have similar effects, but the focus on each game is going to change, and that means that it's going to be worth your while to at least go through the basics on each one of these games to understand how they differ. And if you are already somewhat familiar with one game over the others, you'll know how momentum works, which is good, and you'll know how the core dice rolling system works, which is good. But the particulars may be something you want to just focus on. But if you watch this video, you at least know the basics on a Modiphius 2d20 game. And after that, have fun. All of the game worlds that the 2d20 system uses that I've seen look like they have a high level of danger and adventure opportunities. For those who dare, there are definitely rewards out there. And for those who are looking for something a little bit more clean cut and bottled up and labeled, this may not be the best game for you. If you can't think on your feet and think about how cool your character can do something, you're just there to fire off a shot, figure out how much damage and move on, this might not be the best game for you, honestly. This is a game for people who have a taste for narrative adventure, who really love the idea that their words and actions have a sway in how the game goes, and they can use these tactical elements, things like movement, in creative ways to help them tell a better story and let their characters really try to expand past their own boundaries, sometimes to do something that's really cool. It may cost them, but down the road, as they develop their characters, those things might become commonplace as they get better and better. It's an interesting system, certainly, to look at, and it's been adapted numerous times to a variety of systems that I do respect. Down the road, I am looking, for instance, to get a hold of the Conan role-playing game. Another world that I thought really needed a good narrative system built into it, and I've heard rave reviews about how that game flows. I'm looking forward to that. That one, instead of Fallout, has stress, I believe, which can dog your characters. But that's my covering of the core of the 2d20 system. Hopefully this satisfies my friend. I think it will. I think it mostly answers questions. Of course, specific talents and skills and how those attributes are used, you're going to want to look through the system. At least there should be a primer or a cheat sheet with all the different things you use momentum for, or different elements in the game, how it might be tweaked a little bit, or what they call different things might be a little different. But the core of the system should be pretty consistent throughout. So, that was another session. So, hopefully you liked this, hopefully you enjoyed it. Maybe, forward it to anybody else you know of who might be struggling with the 2d20 system. It doesn't seem to be that complicated at first glance, but there are some nuances to it that beg to be uncovered. And in future videos, I will definitely look at these game systems and talk about those differences in detail, as well as reviews and other elements of the game, wrinkles that you might be interested in. As always, you can steer the conversation towards another session by leaving a comment. If you want some exploration or some light shown on another aspect of gameplay, by all means, let me know, and I'd be happy to make another video for you, or at the very least engage you in conversation in the dialogue box. And, of course, if you want to keep up on any more of these sessions, feel free to like and subscribe. That way I can be a constant resource to you if you need it, and you might find out a few things about what other people find puzzling in role-playing games, and might lead you to some interesting discoveries on your own. So, thanks one and all. I am Rob. I will hopefully see you the next time for another session of Dungeon Tutor. Until then, farewell.